We're heading into the first month of the NFL season, so now we have a good sample size on who's real and who's fake. And that's the premise of today's video. Amir is back. Contenders, pretenders, let's get into it. Let's kick it off here at the Power Rankings. This is a weekly series. We do this again for the entire season. Let us know what you think in the comments. Who do you agree with more and what would you change? At number 10, it is the Minnesota Vikings. Brian Flores has been a mastermind defensively. Kevin O'Connell has been leading the ship, and we all underestimated this team. Am I underestimating them at number 10? Maybe. Let me know in the comments. At number 9, I have the Steelers. As a Browns fan, it hurts me to put them here, but they continue to win games. It doesn't matter who is on the roster, who is their quarterback. They just always find a way to win. And Mike Tomlin is again proving that he's an amazing coach here in the NFL, but it only gets tougher for the Steelers. At number 8, it's one of my favorite teams in the league this year, the Seattle Seahawks, man. I think they are super underrated. They jump all the way up to number 8 in my rankings, and this is a team that's won 3 straight against opponents that, necessarily they weren't favored in all 3 of those games. Geno Smith has been amazing, and again, defensively, they're a top 2 unit in the NFL, so I like them at number 8. At number 7, they can't leave this spot, Amir. It doesn't matter if they win, lose. Preseason, they were here, and of course into the season as well. But the New York Jets, they're finding their stride. I want to see them continue to improve. At number 6, they have too much talent. Injuries have just gotten in their way. The Niners stay at number 6. Again, they just need to be healthy, but there's no way I can move them out of my top 10, even though they have a below 500 record. The only team on this list. So that goes to show how much we still believe in the Niners. At number 5, Philly. They picked up a huge win last week. I think it was great for the confidence of this team going forward. But can they continue to win these big-time games? They're going to need to, apparently, to pass Washington and win this division. Moving into the top 4, Houston. They dropped 2 spots after their loss to Minnesota. Why is there a 6-spot difference? Look, one game doesn't mean everything. Houston is, you got to find the flaws in this team. They have everything top to bottom. They just need to put it all together and find their stride. Hit, get the absolute lowest chemistry that they can out of this unit. Moving into the top 3, Buffalo. Look, they are the number 1 offense in the NFL as far as points. They have dropped 30 plus in every single week this season, and it's scary. Sometimes less is actually more, as we see Stephon Diggs is no longer in town, and the offense is better than ever in the Josh Allen era. Number 1 and number 2 is my preseason number 1 and number 2. It is still Kansas City, still Detroit. Again, the game that Detroit lost, I talked about it last week, Amir. It was the worst game I've ever seen Jared Goff play in a Lions uniform, but They bounced back last week, and I think they have a huge Monday Night Football game against the Seahawks this week. I want to see a statement victory out of Detroit. But that is my top 10. Amir, kick us off here.
So at my 10th spot, I have the Atlanta Falcons. I know people might lose their mind because they're 1-2, but I think after that week 1 game, this team has been clicking. Since then, they've honestly played juggernauts. They went ahead and played Philly. Beat them in a really close game, and they lost to Kansas City, down to the wire. And so I think just because of that, I don't want to move them much down because KC, holds a lot of weight. After that, I have the Saints at number 9. For this team, me personally, I think this team is fool's gold, but, they're not playing like it. Despite them losing to Philly, in a really close matchup, I think that's not enough for me to go ahead and move them down. Instead, I move them up, because they play hard. What I'm worried about now, they have Atlanta, which is a tough game. Atlanta's clicking right now. And after they have Kansas City. So if they don't win this week and they end up dropping 2 straight games and losing those 2, I think they honestly might end up trending downhill after that. After that, my 8th spot, I have Minnesota. Minnesota, I don't know how to feel about them personally. Sam Darnold is looking like Tom Brady right now.
Yes.
Obviously him, learning behind Shanahan and, the greatest San Francisco 49ers quarterback in history, Brock Purdy, for a year. I think that's helping them grow as a quarterback. But I have Minnesota at 8. Both sides of the ball look great. Defensively, they're looking really underrated. They have weapons offensively. 7, I have the Jets. This team, for me, has been just consistently here. They've looked consistently better. Defensively, I say. Offensively, the offense looks a little slow-paced at times, which is kind of concerning. But, A-Rod is getting better week by week. He's getting back in his groove, and I think, they're only going to get better. At my 6th spot, I have Philly. Philly looks dominant offensively. Defensively, it's still some concerns in that secondary, but, with them being young, them kind of being new together, I think they're only going to get better defensively as well. At the 5 spot, San Francisco. This team, in my opinion, is still too good to drop further down, despite the injuries. And, this team really, I mean, defensively, they've been struggling a lot, and it's kind of concerning, because, I mean,
Yeah, we'll
most
talk
of their
about it.
injuries are on offense. And, the offense is still grooving, but defensively, they got to figure some stuff out big time. At the fourth spot is the Buffalo Bills. Me and you had
Surprising.
this team, missing the playoffs in the preseason. And I went out and said, if Josh Allen wins 12 games with this roster, this is insane. But, I think the one thing you can't really replace is chemistry. And this team has chemistry, and I think that's something that you can't really see on paper. And this team is honestly flowing on both sides of the ball. And I'm most impressed with the defense. The defense has looked lights out on all three levels, and I think that's going to carry them through. At the three spot, I have the Texans, despite them getting blown out. I think that personally, that's kind of a wake up call for them, a wake up
Yes.
game. I think it more so has to kind of do with Minnesota being hot rather than Houston being that bad. And so I'm leaving Houston at three. I'm setting so I think they're still a top three roster in the league. At the two spot, I have Detroit. Detroit is still winning games without them fully clicking. I think that this team is only going to get better as well. They already have the chemistry to, they already have the whole city behind their back. I think them, Jared Goff has to, figure something out. The run game still looks solid. Jameer Gibbs looks great. The defense honestly looks pretty good as well, better than last year.
Right.
But, the
Oh, yeah.
pass game is very concerning.
Yeah.
But, I think they'll figure it out. One, Kansas City, I think that's without a doubt the best team in the league. With Mahomes, underperforming, not playing to his standard, they're still winning games, easily. So
Yeah, I mean,
Casey's my number one.
Casey's had some help along the way, but I think it's definitely the best team in the Mahomes era. But let's talk about him here. Now, what we want to do now is we want to go through the top 16 teams in the league based off record, with one exception along the way, and that's the Baltimore Ravens. We'll talk about them. I want to go through all these teams, and we want to look at what they've done so far, where they rank offensively and defensively, and then we want to say, are they contenders or pretenders? Pretty simple. You guys get the premise. For the Chiefs, it's the best team in the Mahomes era. Again, have they had some questionable calls go their way in weeks 1 and 3? Yes. If Isaiah Likely has a half a shoe size lower or smaller, then they're 2-1 at this point in time. So that went in their favor. Weeks 2, though, again, that's the one game where I kind of pushed back on it, because there was some calls there late in that Cincy game where, sure, at the very end, it went their way. But on that drive at the beginning of it, there were some calls that didn't go Kansas City's way, and they backed them up into long fourth downs twice. Regardless, this is a team that's 3-0. Whether if the refs are in their favor or not, they've gotten the job done every single week against formidable opponents. Now, the offensive and defensive ranks, that's based on total yards, just so you guys know going forward throughout today's video. But I mean, overall, outside of those numbers improving, I don't see many flaws with this team, Amir, outside of getting healthy. Guys like Pacheco and Hollywood Brown eventually coming back in January. But your thoughts about the Kansas City Chiefs?
This team really doesn't have many major weaknesses. I say similar to last year, the tackle play can be a little bit iffy at
Yes.
times.
Kingsley
But
Suatia needs to be better.
yeah, but honestly, I mean, offensively, I mean, they still look good. They're not really explosive, but I mean, having Mahomes, the kind of pick apart defenses, it doesn't really matter. And the fact that they're winning games without Kelsey even being productive is insane to me. And also, I mean, defensively, like this is definitely the best defense Mahomes has had. And me and you were both saying this last year, in the playoffs that it was the best defense, but they're playing even better this year, which is crazy.
Yeah.
The fact that they're is a homegrown defensive unit that's been drafted, that's young, that isn't a team that's like have acquired a bunch of pieces off the trades. I think that's really impressive. And even against Baltimore too, them basically forcing two tough throws, for Lamar to make, late in that last drive, for him to get those overthrows, against Cincinnati. I mean, Casey had some calls that did not go their way, and that's why I always say, it's important for fans to really watch the games because you
Right.
go on Twitter, you go on Instagram, you see the last play of the game, and they're like, the refs are bailing the Chiefs out. I mean, because even versus Atlanta, I mean, Casey had like 3 straight flags that are basically giving Atlanta the game, and they still got to stop. They still find a way to win. And so I think the fact that they've started the year off, probably facing, the toughest first 3-game stretch out of the whole entire league, I think that, this, without a doubt, puts them as contenders.
Yeah, again, we touched on it, everything there. Best team in the Mahomes era. They're only going to get better, seemingly, again, and they're only going to get healthier going forward. So, or hopefully, right? We don't want to wish injuries on anybody. But Kansas City Chiefs, they are no doubt contenders going for history this season. Next, I want to talk about the Seattle Seahawks, Amir. Look, I've been hyping them up the last 2 weeks. They were in my top 10, not yours, but I'm sure they were right outside. This is a team that has been taking care of business, and I think that goes under the radar when we talk about just teams in general, right? As far as how good teams are. winning the games you're supposed to win, I think is critical for, again, teams that are going to eventually compete down the line. For the Seahawks, you beat Denver, you beat New England in New England, and then Miami with no Tua Tagovailoa. So you took care of business every week. Unlike the team like the Cleveland Browns, for example, they lost games that they weren't supposed to lose this year. The Seahawks have been taking care of business, as I continue to say that. But they're the only team in the league, Amir, that has a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense outside of the Detroit Lions. But their defense, top two in the league. And I think it was the perfect head coach hire. You're bringing Mike McDonald, however you want to say it. And he really has untapped a lot of this potential in this defensive secondary and especially front seven. They brought in Byron Murphy. He might be the front runner for defensive rookie of the year. And this team's only going to get better offensively. Ken Walker's on his way back, Amir. Now, I'm going to say this. I think they're contenders, and that might be a hot take. But let's look at this. I want to show you this because I brought it up last week. And for those who are seeing this for the second time, excuses. I really want Amir to see this because I was never the biggest Geno Smith believer until like the last year and a half or so. But Geno Smith, this was based on last week's stats on the road versus New England. Very tough defense, I might add. Since 2021, only one quarterback has hit all three of these thresholds. 40-plus dropbacks, an average depth of target of 8+ yards, and 0 off-target throws in a single game. That quarterback, of course, is Geno Smith. And on the year, and this is including the first 3 weeks, he has a completion percentage over expected in the 97th percentile. Amir, the next closest is like 88%, and that's Patrick Mahomes. There's nobody close playing at the level of Geno Smith at the moment outside of the elite of the elites. Your thoughts on the Seahawks this year?
So, I would say, preseason, I was saying that this would be, underrated team. Defensively, I'm high on McDonald. Constantly I was hyping up the secondary, which in my opinion is the most impressive part about this defense. And seeing them hold the Dolphins, with or without sort of 3 points is insane. But, me personally, I'm still not high on Geno. I'm not much of an eye test ranker. I'm big in the stats as well, just like you. And I think that, these 3 games, could honestly aid to the Seahawks' confidence, which is honestly a good thing that they're starting the year off, playing against some of the lower end teams and lower end units. And I think that could honestly help their morale and their confidence. But as of right now, I haven't really seen anything that really, shocks my eye or really for me to put them in that top 10 or contender category. But I would say the way the defense has been playing, which is amazing, offensively, they've always had pieces. Even last year, they had a bunch of talent. Having Smith and Jibba, coming back. He's now a vet. Having Tyler Lockett, DK, Kenneth Walker been playing great.
Yes.
And so I think with these pieces, they definitely could make some noise. But for me, I would still put them as contenders.
Yeah, I have them as contenders. I think it's a big week though. They play on the road in Detroit on Monday night, primetime football. I think it's a huge game. Even if they come out and they lose the game, I want to see them be competitive, right? I want them to play. I want it to be a one-score game, and I want Seattle to really, hey, this is like our proving game. We're going to put the world on notice. We are an actual team that you got to take seriously. But again, JSN is week 1, he was down. Week 2, he was up. Week 3, he was down. The trend says that, of course, he's going to have a big week in week 4. Now, again, Detroit struggles against elite wide receivers, and they're actually the worst secondary in the league, Amir, right now, based on all the analytics. So these teams met last year, Seattle and Detroit. Seattle, I think it was either Seattle won 37-31 or vice versa. Regardless, it was a shootout. So big game Monday night. I think it's a big game for both teams on that spectrum. But I'm going to say contenders. You're going to say pretenders. Week 3 in the season. We'll make this one quick. The Minnesota Vikings, look, they have one of the best coaches in the league. They have another coach that comes under the Shanahan tree, just like Sean McVay, just like Kyle Shanahan for the San Francisco 49ers and Matt LaFleur and many other coaches around the league, like Kevin Stefanski as well. These offenses are incredibly hard to stop for this reason. They protect the football, they run it, and they control the clock. They make minimal mistakes, and they just do enough to win the football game. Now, when you have more talent on your side, like Mike McDaniel does in Miami, of course, it makes it easier to go out there and put up 30 points a game with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Same thing can be said with San Fran and the other, of course, other guys. When you have the more talent, right, you could put up more offensive numbers. But the premise of it is to make minimal mistakes and win the games. For the Vikings, they've done just that, right? But Sam Darnold's averaging like 250 yards a game and a touchdown. He's killing it. I mean, this is a dude that's in the physical prime of his career. Is he the guy going forward? I don't know. But I think this is a team that has had 3 straight weeks of being underdogs, and they've had 3 wins against 2 elite teams, Amir. I mean, before the year, we said San Fran and Houston were Super Bowl contenders.
Yep.
Minnesota's knocked both of them off, and handily, too. All right, those games weren't necessarily close. Your thoughts on the Vikings this year, man? Can they continue to keep this rolling? Because they still have guys like Hawkinson and Addison coming back into the mix.
This team is definitely probably one of the weirdest teams to really rank. I say them in New Orleans. This team is loaded on paper, but is Sam Darnold the guy? And for me personally, it's a sample size, but I mean it's a really good sample size. And so, I don't want to go ahead and knock them off, or write them off right away. But I'm still gonna keep them in that pretenders range
Yes.
Just now. But like you mentioned, Kevin O'Connell, amazing coach. Brian Flores, a great defensive mind. And I'm not gonna lie, if this team continues, on this path to just, taking care of the football, forcing turnovers
Yes.
and getting Jay Jettis the ball every single drive, it's gonna be really hard to stop.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm gonna say the Pretenders as of now. Again, we're talking for the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
And I just don't think they're there yet, right? And plus, we have nothing to go off of as far as Sam Darnold, and if he can win those big time games. Now he's never been in a position to, but point remains, he's never won any really big time significant games. I would argue that his 2 biggest wins of his career were the last 2 weeks, Amir, for the Minnesota Vikings. Pittsburgh Steelers. They are the number 1 seed in the AFC North, obviously. One of the most talented divisions. And this is a team that has a lot. Again, they don't have a Shanahan, a coach from the Shanahan tree, but they are an Arthur Smith led offense that is the same philosophy. Again, minimal check down throws, just do enough to pick up the first down again and again, run the football and protect the football. Play great defense. They have the number 1 defense in the NFL by a wide margin right now, Amir, and they've had 3 quality wins. I mean, you go on the road to Atlanta, beat them, on the road to Denver, which is never an easy place to play with the mile high advantage, even though the talent is not there with Denver's offense, still tough place to play. And then you take care of business at home against the Chargers. This week, of course, you can go 4-0. Now, again, after week 4, we know Pittsburgh has the toughest schedule in the league, so it only gets harder. These are much needed wins. But I'll say this, Amir. I think they found their quarterback. I don't think Russell Wilson, unless they go on a big losing streak, gets his job back. Your thoughts on the Steelers?
Yeah, personally, I agree with you on that one. It's going to be really hard for Russ to get his job back. And even though
Steelers
Fields
just
isn't
look
playing,
amazing.
is that, even though he's not throwing for 300 yards or putting crazy MVP numbers, he's still winning them games, using his legs, taking care of the ball, which is the number 1 thing for a quarterback. Take care of the football, convert on third downs, and,
Yes.
improvise. And, I think for this team, I've been saying that all offseason, I think they're going to have the best defense in the league throughout the entirety of the year. But I'm still putting them in pretenders because, I mean, you brought up a great point. Once they hit week 5 and they play Dallas, I mean, after that, they got the Jets, they got
Yeah,
Philly, they
San
got
Fran,
Baltimore
Philly. I
twice.
mean, they got
Right.
everybody.
Yeah. I'm going to say Kansas City, Cincy twice. And so, for me, I think that's going to really tell, once they kind of pass that week 7 or week 8 mark to really see if they're pretenders or contenders. So as of right now, in my opinion, they're still pretenders.
I'm with you there, but there's one thing that we know: you can never count out a guy like Mike Tomlin.
Yeah.
I can promise you one thing: this team's not going to end the season under 500, so that streak will also continue. Let's talk about your favorite player of all time outside of Brock Purdy, Amir. Josh Allen. This is a team that we preached all off season, and we're going to pat ourselves on the back here. Less is more, right? We talked about this the entire offseason. Sure, did we have them coming up a little bit short of the playoffs? Yes, we did, right? But that was because of their defense. We weren't sure of, hey, they lost their all-pro level linebacker in Matt Milano, the voice of that defense. They lost 4 starting secondary pieces, and we were expecting this team to play at the same level that they were. That's what worried us, was the defense. But I mean, hey, sometimes less is more, and we've been preaching that all off season. They've had quality wins over Arizona, great comeback win in the second half. And really, after that third quarter, when the third quarter started in that Arizona game, we've seen the Buffalo team that we've seen now, right? That's when that switch flipped for this team, seemingly. They came back in Arizona. They blew out Miami, blew out Jacksonville. They put up 30. They're averaging 37 points a game, Amir. Absolutely insane. One of the best offenses, one of the best defenses, and a lot of these young secondary pieces are stepping up, right? Offensively, you have guys like Khalil Shakir, who is dominating to start the season. James Cook, I mean, what do you have? 3 touchdowns 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Amir, your thoughts on the Bills, man? Maybe we underrated them too much. Maybe they should have been a top 2 to top 3 seed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just as surprised as you are. This team is starting off 3-0, and the thing I'm not surprised them starting off 3-0, but like the dominance with it. And
Yes, that's agreed.
seeing this team defensive has been most impressive. Like, we all know Josh Allen is a great quarterback. We all know, he's gonna be able to, put up crazy numbers to kind of, carry the load offensively, despite losing Diggs. But defensively, man, like they lose the whole entire secondary and they come back and they're playing better than they did last year. Last year, even when they were healthy, I mean, defensively, they still struggled at times. And, seeing this team be able to get stops, get turnovers, and most impressively up front, stopping a run and, getting sacks and stuff like that, getting pressures and stuff like that, really making it tough on these quarterbacks. I think that this team is contenders, at this rate.
Honestly, again, I'm going to keep preaching it. I know less is more, and we keep saying that. But Terry McLaurin could be on the move, maybe to Buffalo. A guy like Christian Kirk has been struggling there early on with Jacksonville. Maybe he goes over to Buffalo. Or Wan'Dale Robinson. Man, I'm gonna start that train. I think Wan'Dale to Buffalo is huge.
Yeah.
I've been high on him since he came out of Kentucky, right? Ever since I've seen him dominate my Gators. You see Albert back here. But Wan'Dale Robinson's an amazing talent, and if New York wants to move off of him for some picks, even though he's a young talent, I think Buffalo would be a perfect spot for him. Regardless, we're getting ahead of ourselves, and we'll maybe revisit the trade talks in a couple weeks. But the Detroit Lions, both of our NFC favorites coming into the year, they were our pick, and we said, hey, they're going to go to the Super Bowl. And if there was any team to knock off the Chiefs, it would be the team in front of you. They've started off the year 2-1. I've said it at the top of the show. That game against Tampa Bay at home, it was the worst game Jared Goff has ever played in a Lions uniform. But he bounced back to form. Outside of Sam Laporta going down in week 3 against the Cardinals, everything went right for the Lions in week 3. They have a top 5 offense, top 10 defense. They're the only other team outside of Seattle that can say that. And I think they're back on track here outside of, again, losing a guy like Laporta. Your thoughts on the Lions here?
Yeah, so I mentioned it earlier. With this team sort of underperforming and them kind of struggling a little bit. Start the year off. I mean, they still haven't hit full stride, and they're still 2-1. I think that goes to show how loaded this team is. The overall culture of that team. And I brought up the point that I think defensively they're slightly better. The secondary is still extremely concerning, just like last year. But up front defensively, I think they're really emphasizing on making Hutch's job easier. Sort of freeing them up. I mean, because last year he was eating double and triple teams the entire year. I think this year they're really trying to, create one-on-one opportunities and, let him feast, let him eat. And, offensively, I mean, the run game is still going to be great. That. I mean, they got the best O-line of football. Jahmyr Gibbs is playing great. J-Mo is looking amazing. Amaral, finally started clicking. They overall just got to, kind of turn up the, their pass game consistently. It goes to Jared Goff. Can Jared Goff repeat what he did last year? If he does, this team is without a doubt contenders.
Yeah, again, they're contenders here. I think he's doing that. I think he got back on the right track there.
Yeah.
And not to brag, I had Hutchinson as my depoy coming into the year in a 5-sack week there in week 2. It's going to help his case down the line. But the impressive part about having a top 10 defense for Detroit is the fact that their secondary is the worst in the NFL, according to all the analytics. And of course, they're the worst against slot receivers as well. So a side note, if you have JSN or any Seattle wide receiver, start them in fantasy this weekend. But Detroit, they're contenders, no doubt about it. The Houston Texans find the flaws. I think the only flaw that you can really say right now is chemistry and continuity, right? Working in all these new pieces defensively and offensively. I think that's the only flaw. But again, they beat Indy, they beat Chicago, 2 convincing wins. And now they did lose to Minnesota. And like you mentioned at the top of the show, that was a wake-up call. But top 5 defense, the offense is only going to get better, you got to imagine. So again, chemistry is the only flaw. And outside of that, I think they're contenders, Amir.
Yeah, I mean, this team without a doubt was loaded from top to bottom, and you brought up a great point. I think chemistry is the biggest thing for this offense. I think for this offense, they have to either be set in stone on relying on number one, or be set in stone on making this receiving core a full-out committee, and, letting them all feast. I think, CJ Stroud and the offense really kind of gelling together and really finding ways to, either spread the ball around right now. It's kind of slowing them down offensively, But other than that, I mean, defensively, they're great. The run game looks great. Mixon, had a couple of huge games. And I think without a doubt, contenders.
The Philadelphia Eagles, one of the maybe a top five loaded roster or one of the top five best rosters, top to bottom in the NFL. But again, they have started the year and they've had some of the same questions as last year. The offense is stagnant at times, as we saw in all 3 weeks at different times and different stretches. The defense, the secondary is questionable, right? They give up so many big plays, and it could be due to the fact that they have a lot of new pieces in that secondary. But we saw these same issues last year. And now they have a new defensive coordinator in Vic Fangio. We know he likes to run his Fangio 6 defense. But again, I think we've seen a lot of the same issues as last year. The reason why they're 2-1 is because Amir, they had maybe the best offseason acquisition. They brought in Saquon Barkley, and they're 2-1 because of Saquon Barkley. But this is a team that I think, just like the next team we'll talk about, they need to just find their stride, right? Just get more comfortable week after week. And I think you're going to be more dominant because of it. But top 2 offense in the league still with all these issues that I'm saying. Amir, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing, finding their stride. And I think, offensively, I mean, they're already great, and even though Jalen Hurts, has trouble right now taking care of the football, I think this team still, is pretty much swarmed with ease, on these great defenses. And, they very easily should be 3-0, but that secondary, is really struggling big time. And you brought up a great point. I think Big Fangio, him sort of bringing his new system there, them kind of bringing in basically an entire new secondary altogether to play as one. I think that's the biggest thing. Finding ways to eliminate explosive plays. If they can do that, this team without a doubt is legit. And I still have them as contenders.
Yeah, I have them as contenders as well. They just need to fine-tune some things,
Yeah.
just like this next team, the New York Jets. They started off the year, with a loss, which most of America predicted, playing San Fran after Rodgers is coming off an Achilles injury. It's not easy. San Fran was fully healthy at that point in time, and if they're healthy or even somewhat healthy, they're a Super Bowl contender. But for the Jets, their defense has gotten better, and like I talked about with the Seahawks, just winning the games you're supposed to win is critical for big-time teams or teams with big-time aspirations. You beat Tennessee, you beat New England 2 games, you needed to win, and you won them both. Now the offense is, again, they got to find their stride, right? They got to get more comfortable on that side of the ball. Don't rely solely on a guy like Breece Hall. Now, I do think, Amir, this upcoming week is a big week for me because they play Denver, and Patrick Surtain is going to have this man, Garrett Wilson, on Alcatraz. He's going to have him on lockdown. So I want to see guys like Allen Lazard, Mike Williams, get more comfortable and step up. Guys like Braylon Allen. I want to see some of these other pieces like Conklin, help out Garrett Wilson, help out Aaron Rodgers ultimately. So it's not just such a one-dimensional, Breece Hall or Garrett Wilson offense. But I think they can do that. And I think, again, Aaron Rodgers is only going to get better. And I think this is the team that we projected them to be before the year. I still have them as contenders. Amir?
Yeah, so I still have them as contenders. I think offensively, they definitely do have to get clicking a little bit more. Only reason why defensively, it's ranked 7 is because of week 1. Them kind of, their first game being, in San Francisco, which is, tough for anybody. But other than that, I mean, this team honestly looks solid on both sides of the ball. Offensively, I think that Aaron Rodgers, he's finally getting in his groove. And I think that this week is really huge. Take advantage of this week, either try some stuff out or really, build your confidence up. I mean, because after that, I mean, you got Minnesota, Buffalo, then you got to go to Pittsburgh. 3 tough teams right now. And so I think that they got to take advantage of this week, really figure some stuff out and go on a run and prove themselves.
Yeah, it's a Nathaniel Hackett revenge week. He's playing Denver, of course, got fired just a few years ago as halfway through the season as a head coach. So big week for Nathaniel Hackett. They want to play for their offensive coordinator and put up big numbers, but they're going to have to do it without Garrett Wilson for the majority of it. For the Saints, look, outside from this last week against Philly, they had 3 straight weeks where they put up 40-plus points. And for this season solely, they bring in a guy like Clint Kubiak, new offensive coordinator. He has modernized this offense, and it's really opened things up for a guy like Derek Carr to operate at a high level. They beat Carolina. They went into Dallas. I think that was a big-time win in prime time, dominating Dallas the way that they did. But this is a team that, even though their defense is 21st, I think they could be argued to be an overall like top 10 to top 12 unit in the league. So you have arguably an above average offense and defense, 2 units that could arguably be top 10. I think it's a team that's been fully unlocked with their coaching staff. Now, I'm still not a big fan of Dennis Allen. I still think he's a below average coach. But, I mean, hey, Amir, what do you think about the Saints? And what do you think about the fact that Derek Carr plays his best football in these election years? 2016, MVP level year for Oakland. 2020, best year to I think it was either to end his best year in Las Vegas, I'll say, and then of course 2024 New Orleans. His best 3 years, coincidentally, election years. Your thoughts on the Saints and what my ramble there?
So this team, in my opinion, still are pretenders. I think that this team, you brought up a great point. Dennis Allen, me and you both are high on him. I think that, the defensive rank right now doesn't really, show, how great this defense is. I think from top to bottom, they have great pieces, especially in the secondary. And, Lante Taylor 2 years ago was, my favorite DB in the draft. Super underrated. Adebo looks great. Tyrann Mathieu's been playing great. But the most impressive part is, what Clint Kubiak has done to this offense. And, Kyle Shanahan, every coach that comes from that tree are balling right now and getting paid. And I think that this team, really has to lock in on winning this week because, I brought up earlier in the show, if they lose this week to Atlanta and, go ahead and go to Kansas City, which, they're probably going to lose that, it's going to be hard to really kind of build that confidence back up. Now, I would say, after that, they got 3 straight easy opponents. I think they got like Tampa, which isn't too terrible. Denver, then, the Chargers. But it's like they got to really take advantage of this first stretch to really, gel together and unlock themselves.
Yeah, I think they're pretenders as well. I think this is the common Saints team. They start the year off great. They give their fan base hope. Trust me, I'm a Drew Brees fan. Happened almost every year. But then they collapse at the end. I think that's going to happen here with the Saints. And I think just with how the Saints operate, how the franchise has always operated, they're going to get rid of Dennis Allen at the end of the day. And they're going to have Clint Kubiak be the next head coach. They always hire in-house. Different conversation for a different day. Excuse me there. But again, the Saints, they've been a fun team so far. Hopefully they can keep it going and prove me wrong. Their division rival, the Tampa Bay Bucks. Look, I think this all comes down to Baker's mentality. You see their offense and defensive ranks, not great. Now, again, I think they've had really good weeks offensively, but then when they have really good weeks offensively, their defense is not all the way there, and then vice versa. But regardless, they found a way to win 2 of their first 3 games, and arguably the easiest opponent in those first 3 games, they lost to the Denver Broncos just a few days ago. Now, Bucky Irving, rookie running back out of Oregon, has been playing amazing. He has arguably taken the starting position over a healthy Rachaad White, even though he had a bit of an issue with his groin. But this offense is fun to watch. They brought in the offensive coordinator from Kentucky, and Godwin's back into the slot. He is dominating. This is the best he's looked since Tom Brady was in town. Hey, Mike Evans struggled last week against Pat Surtain, but who doesn't struggle against Pat Surtain? I don't know. I think if this team is really going to compete for this division and win this division, it comes down to Baker, him being, I think it comes down to Baker's mentality, right? Him as a leader and just being consistent throughout the entire season. If he can protect the football the way that he is, and if they could just do enough on a weekly basis and Baker could be the great leader that we all know he is, I think they might actually have a chance as of right now to probably be favorites to me to win the division. But your thoughts about the Bucks?
Yeah, I still have them as pretenders because I think the contenders category, is kind of solidified right now. But you brought up a great point. I think this team has potential to win a division again. I think that, kind of looking at last year, Baker and his offense and defense is kind of up and down, extremely inconsistent. One week they're looking dominant, other week they're, completely, shit in the bed. And I think that, they got to really, figure themselves out completely because, the last thing you want is for, Atlanta to get rolling. You end up playing them twice to end up dropping both games to them and them kind of running away with the division. I think that, offensively, the rank doesn't really explain, how good they've looked at their absolute best. Right. Baker's, throwing the football well overall, aside from last week. Defensively, they still got to figure some stuff out defensively, specifically in that secondary. And them kind of losing some pieces up front. But, I think that it's all about Baker, putting a team on your back, leading them, sort of, bringing that mindset that you have, the mindset you had at Cleveland where you kind of drew the best out of your players, your teammates and stuff like that. And I think that's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, again, I had contenders as well, but I think that as of right now, I'd probably predict them to win the division with how Atlanta, their tough schedule, right, throughout the entire season. But I take that back. Atlanta might have a relatively easy schedule. I'll have to relook. But for the Chargers, look, they bring in Jim Harbaugh, and I think they're playing and they are operating as advertised. We knew they were going to run the football, make minimal mistakes, and that is exactly what Jim Harbaugh has done at every single stop of his career, whether if it was at Utah all the way up to the Chargers. This is a guy that has played the played football the same exact way. They're going to bully ball up front, and they're going to throw when they have to. And so far, it's worked out for the Chargers. They've won the games they're supposed to win. The Raiders, the Panthers, you can argue they probably should have won the Steelers game. But again, we both had them on the road in Pittsburgh, losing that one. So we weren't fooled about that. But the offensive rank, look, again, they're not going to put up super crazy yard numbers because of how the offense operates. But the defense, I think, is alarming because this is a team that has relatively the same core, Amir. And over the last 5 years with Brandon Staley, they've consistently been bottom 5 in the league, giving up some of the most points in the league. And that's flipped this year under Jim Harbaugh. Your thoughts on this team? And again, the only other thing I have to say is Justin Herbert hurt his foot. Is he going to be out next week? I doubt it, especially with how they play. He's not asked to do as much as he was in years past. I think Herbert's going to be fine, but again, he does have a foot injury, something to monitor. Your thoughts on the Chargers?
Yeah, this is a team defensively who has looked terrible the past years, but this year has flip-flopped. And I think that, this team has always had, great pieces defensively. And, to see them now finally, playing up to that standard, it's going to be great. And I think that, this team is still going to finish around the mark, around 7 to 8 wins. I think that they're pretty much building the foundation, the sort of, kind of right for next year. Like next year, I can definitely see them, either trading up in the draft or making trades in the offseason, or, go ahead, grabbing some more weapons offensively, in that receiving core, sort of build up the offense even more. And I think that, J.K. Dobbins has been super impressive, by the way. Shout out to him. Joe All has looked amazing too. Yeah. Right, yeah, absolutely amazing. I think that, the rankings for offensively, still doesn't really, kind of explain, how well the offense has looked. It's literally just like Harbaugh's offense. We're going to pound the rock, run the football, and exactly what we're going to run, and we're still going to run it. And I think that this team has to keep on grinding, keep on going, and really just kind of finding those those leaders on the offensive side.
Yeah, pretenders for the both of us. Moving over to the Packers, who just like the Niners have the best quarterback in their franchise's history. Jordan Love, right? Jordan Love. He went down in week 1 in a situation where he shouldn't have been in the game. It really went down, but it happened. And hey, they're saying he might come back as soon as this week against the Minnesota Vikings, if not probably the week after. Modern medicine is absolutely insane. Regardless, this team has found a way to win without Jordan Love on the field. Malik Willis has stepped in, and they've he's another coach under the Shanahan tree in Matt LaFleur. They run the football, make minimal mistakes, and Malik Willis has made those throws when they need him to make those throws. 2 big-time wins in a row. So shout out to the Packers for that. A top 5 offense with Malik Willis as the majority quarterback. When Jordan Love was on the field, Jaden Reed really looked good in that Brazil game. But ultimately, I think they're just waiting for Love, right? Take that how you want it. But I think when Jordan Love comes back, this team's going to take that next step, and they're going to be in that Super Bowl contention tier. So I'm actually Amir. I've been impressed about what I'm seeing. I might say they're a contender at this point in time when Jordan Love comes back. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if this team can just, at least just hold it down, even if they drop one game or two, and, could possibly, win one more game at least, this team honestly handled this job, while the franchise quarterback is out. And I think for Malik Willis, kind of stepping up in that role, shout out to him, his first game against Indy, he didn't play that well. He didn't throw the ball much, but last week he looked lights out. He looked amazing and stuff like that, offensively as a whole. And, I'm still leaning towards this team being pretenders, but it's like on the brink. I think once J Love comes back and, we kind of see, if he's fully back healthy, how he's moving around, how he's throwing the ball, then, I'll really get a better feel for, if this team is in that contender or pretenders range.
Yeah, I think I had Baltimore as a contender before the season. I would gladly swap them out for Green Bay at this point in time if I had the same group as before the season. It's just been impressive what Matt LaFleur continues to do, even if he has a lot of pieces or not a lot of pieces. But also Jordan Love's a top 1 quarterback in the league. So when he comes back, ultimately they're going to just do better. I don't think they're going to lose a game when Jordan Love comes back. Okay, all right, that's enough. For the Commanders, this is a team, Amir, you see the stat at the bottom. They have scored on every single offensive possession in the last 2 games. They have not punted. The punter might not even travel with the team to next week's game because it doesn't look like they're going to need them. They either get a field goal, they get some kind of points, which is a great sign, right? The number 2 overall pick, Jaden Daniels, a guy that didn't, you didn't know if he could be, you didn't know how well he would translate to the NFL, especially early on in his career. But he's done that, I think, too. Yeah, I think he has, right? Week 1, ran the ball a little bit more than you wanted to see, but that is, again, a rookie quarterback that knows he wants, he's dynamic with his legs. But outside of the week 1, I guess, lack of passing, he's been an amazing passer. He dropped a dime yesterday to Terry McLaurin for the game. I mean, hey, they're taking care of business. And I think, honestly, with the way that they're playing now, they could beat Tampa Bay if they play next week. But here's the alarming thing. Top 6 offense, by the way. But the defensive rank at 29th in the league is alarming for all this defensive and veteran talent that they brought in with a defensive-minded head coach. They've struggled against teams that necessarily don't have the greatest offenses. But your thoughts, Amir, about the Commanders so far?
This team offensively looks great, and I think what's super impressive is Jay Dale taking care of the football. And, we kind of saw similar last year. That Houston Texas team with C.J. Stroud. Stroud being able to come in, take care of the football, and win them games and lead them to the playoffs. Do I think they're going to make the playoffs this year? For Washington, I don't think so. But I think Jay Daniels has been great. On the ground and in the air. The fact that he's gotten even better, it looked like a night and day quarterback from week 1 to week 3 now. And, I think that's the biggest thing. But defensively, they have been terrible. Just like last year, the secondary has been struggling big time. And, last night, the way the offense is moving, you would think that, they would have either blown Cincy out or would have won by multiple possessions. But, their secondary is that bad to where it was like, Burrow was playing out of his mind, and they honestly got lucky that they even won. And I think that's the biggest thing, figure the defense out, figure that, the secondary out, if they got to either trade for, a veteran piece or sign somebody out of free agency, just do it to at least make it a little better and try to make the playoffs.
I'll tell you what they should do. They should go out there and draft this cornerback from Siena Heights. I think he could help the secondary. I mean, hey, it can't get worse. Bringing a guy that can actually do something productive on the field. Regardless, we both have them as pretenders, but again, they're in a good spot to compete for this division at the end of the day. For the Niners, look, you started off the year strong and then injuries, and then injuries, and then injuries. Right now, a lot of your core is injured. Christian McCaffrey's out for the next probably month. Deebo Samuel, is he going to be back next week? Probably not. He's probably going to miss the next 2 to 3 weeks, and then another week for caution because of his history. George Kittle is out as of right now. You have some injured defensive pieces as well. Amir, this team is just dealing with injuries at the moment. I mean, last week, Brock Purdy, I texted in our group chat and I said, this is a game where he needs to show out. This is a game where, it can prove me wrong. And it could be like, okay, he is a legitimate top 10 quarterback in the league. And he did. He did show out. I mean, Juwan Jennings played out of his mind. I don't think Juwan Jennings, he put up career highs, Amir, quite literally across the board. 11 receptions, I think 175 yards and 3 touchdowns. And they still couldn't beat the Rams. I mean, they collapsed in that fourth quarter, but I mean, Brock Purdy has been playing amazing. The offense, despite losing all of their pieces pretty much, and Brandon Ayuk has struggled, they're still a top 3 offense in the league. Amir, what's the issue here with the San Francisco 49ers? And is it time to give up on them?
I brought up earlier in the show, defensively, it's been some major concerns. Seeing them in the fourth quarter versus the Rams, I mean, they completely crumbled. Seeing them against Minnesota, seeing Sam Darnold basically drive on that team with ease, I think that's super concerning. And honestly, last year, I thought San Fran, defense was a bit overrated as well. I thought the secondary struggled way more than they, should have been struggling last year. Last year, once the playoffs hit, the run defense struggled. And I think that, now it's like, the fact that they're losing all these pieces and the offense is still ranked 3rd is insane to me. Yeah. And so, I'm still going to have them as contenders because, last time, they started off bad, in 21 where they finished, 10-7, they still were like, a player or two away from beating the Rams and making the Super Bowl. So, I think the fact that they have Shanahan, they have their quarterback, they have, a great offensive mastermind like him. I'm still having them in that contenders race.
I have them as contenders as well, but I will say this. You can say what you want about San Fran. They just need to make the playoffs. If they make it, I can promise you nobody's lining up to say we want to play the 49ers, especially early on in the playoffs. But again, they have all the talent. They just need to be healthy. which has kind of been the song and dance of this, I guess, era of San Francisco football. I believe, yes, this is the last one, Amir. The Baltimore Ravens, they're at 1-2. I wanted to throw them on this list because we had them as contenders, or if not on the brink right before the season. They bring in Derrick Henry, right? They brought in some other pieces. The only thing that they really lost was their defensive coordinator. Now, again, it's a big loss, right? Because last year they were a top three unit pretty much from the season start to the season's end, including the playoffs. But then Mike McDonald leaves for Seattle. And now you've been the 23rd ranked defense in the first couple weeks of the year. Now, the defense individually, they've had okay moments, but there was times in that Kansas City game where they couldn't stop Kansas City. The Raiders, they couldn't stop the Raiders, which they're in shambles right now, and maybe we'll talk about them down the line. But in week 3, I think we saw the best version, or the best, I guess, we saw the best version of this defense so far this year. Against Dallas, they shut them down against an offense that was operating at a high level in the Dallas Cowboys, and they put them to rest. Now, the offense has been alarming. Derrick Henry's been crazy, right? There's no father time impact on a guy like Derrick Henry. Number one offense in the league. Now, the defense has struggled, but the alarming thing is because the flock cannot finish. At the bottom, you see it. In NFL history, the coach that has the most fourth quarter losses when leading by 7 or more points heading into the fourth quarter is John Harbaugh, a guy that we, historically think of this amazing regular season coach, a guy that always puts his team in a position to win in the postseason. He cannot finish games. And that's been, again, throughout his entire career, he has the most fourth quarter losses. And I just think that's the alarming thing. If they can fine tune some things and figure out how to finish games, they're going to be the same old Ravens that we've always seen, Amir. But your thoughts? I have them as, at this point, I will say, pretenders for the Ravens, even though that they look their absolute best at the moment.
Yeah, I still have them as pretenders right now, but I mean that easily can't change. We have a guy like Harbaugh who is still a great coach. Having Lamar Jackson is why I think they're still on that brink, to kind of fall in the either or category. But what's been concerning too, is definitely the defense. And in fact, I mean, this team couldn't stop Minshew. I mean, Minshew was dicing them apart, in that second half, especially, in crunch time, looking like Tom Brady, against that Baltimore defense. And man, them losing McDonald was huge, man. And I brought up all off season, man, like that was a major loss. You finally found your guy. You basically have a historic defense last year, which basically carried that
They
team.
did.
It's like now it's like, I mean, it's the complete opposite. They definitely did look solid, against Dallas, but it's the Cowboys. The
Right.
Cowboys are a team that's completely unpredictable. A team
They
that's
don't show up
completely
in big time
inconsistent.
games.
Exactly. And so, this team is definitely hard to gauge right now. Other than that, Lamar looks great, on in the air and on the ground. Despite him, kind of missing some major throws every here and there. I mean, offensively, it's still great. Derrick Henry looked amazing last game, I would say too. But this team really just has to figure this stuff out defensively.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's my favorite part of the show, Amir. Of course, you see it on your screen here. 11-5 for me last week. That seems to just be what I do all season. I can't get over 11. And well, again, in week 2, Amir, we both struggled. Me and you were both at 500, if not worse than that. Regardless, on the season, there's a couple game difference, but that's how it was last year. And then Amir caught up to me within like one game at some point in the year last year. It's just what's going to happen. Now, I will say the first month of the year is always the hardest to gauge because the second half of the year, you kind of know who everybody is. So these records, again, we're both shooting for that 200 win mark or at the bare minimum 70%. But here's our predictions this week. And we do these separately, of course, but we talk a lot about football. So eventually you form the same opinions. Now, some interesting matchups here. We both have Atlanta at home, even though New Orleans has looked like the better team. We have Minnesota on the road defeating, of course, the Green Bay Packers, two teams that, now again, if Jordan Love is healthy, Amir, does that pick change for you if Jordan Love plays for the Packers? Because there's a chance, technically, as of again, we're recording this on Tuesday.
Yeah.
So as of right now, there's a chance Jordan Love plays. Does that change the outcome of that game for you?
Man, that's tough. At some point, I think that Minnesota's momentum is going to stop. So honestly,
I'm going to say it. I think I'm taking the Packers if he comes back.
well, look, honestly, I mean, me personally, I got to catch up. So I'm gonna go ahead and keep Minnesota.
Well, I'll go. Yeah. If Jordan Love plays, I'm taking Green Bay. I'll say that. The Rams and the Chicago Bears, I think, is another interesting one. Of course, the Rams on the road haven't necessarily looked great this year. They've had a lot of injuries. They're on the road in Chicago, one of the better home field advantages. But I mean, hey, Caleb Williams is coming off his best career game. We still have the probably the underdog in this game, the Rams getting the job done on the road. Goes to show you how great of a coach that Sean McVay is. Now, a lot of the same can be said here. We have surprisingly, a lot of road teams winning this week. Again, Philly, KC, Cleveland. If you go back to this screen, you see Minnesota, Pittsburgh, the Rams, just to name a few, winning their games. Cincinnati, Dallas. A lot of road teams. I think that scares me. And honestly, I might have to go back on this. But here, of course, you see the four o'clock games and then the primetime games. Another week with two Monday Night Football games, Amir. What do you think about those Monday Night Football games? Having two of them on Monday night. What do you think about those or that?
Honestly, I like. I mean, honestly, more football is great in my opinion, but it kind of sucks having them like so close to each other.
Yes, feels
Having a
weird.
right, yeah, like on a Monday night where I got either classes the next day or practice the next day, and I got to split screen them and stay up late. It definitely can get a bit annoying, but I don't mind. It's more football, so.
I'll tell you what, Amir. Just to make things interesting here, I'll make a contingency thing here. So it's important that we listen to these at the end of the podcast. If Jordan Love doesn't return, and I'm still going to stick with Minnesota, but if he doesn't return, I'll take Seattle on the road Monday Night Football. Just to give us two different games here this week. But again, it all depends on Jordan Love. If he doesn't play, give me Seattle. But if he does play, give me Green Bay, and I'm sticking with Detroit. Hopefully that makes sense. Episode 212, Amir, contenders, pretenders. We started doing like all these different fun stuff last year, and we're going to continue to throughout the season. But thanks for making time for the show. This is recorded a little bit early, but any last thoughts before we get out of here?
No, man, I'm excited for the games this week, just like always.
Yeah, week 4. Of course, big game for a lot of people. Deshaun Watson, figure it out, man. Figure it out and let's win some football games.